Toastmaster Elizabeth Ramirez. We would like to pose the following question. What mental image picture that comes to your mind when you hear the term midlife crisis? Did any of you or many of you have an image of an older man driving a red Corvette with his shiny new 30-year-old girlfriend at his side? Does that seem critical or judgmental? Maybe. But again, how many of you had a similar mental image? Well, Elizabeth is here to let you know she gets it.
I do.
But she's also here to help you think of it in another way. Please welcome Toastmaster Elizabeth Ramirez with speech entitled Crisis or Transition. Please welcome.
The concept of a midlife crisis is something that most people may look upon with a mixture of disdain and a healthy dose of fear. But today, my hope is that you will no longer look at a midlife crisis as a crisis, but rather as a time of transition and rediscovery. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and guests.
Good morning.
I am here to inform your minds and hopefully invigorate your souls. So who here remembers their teen years? I know I do. And I can tell you I had so many nuclear meltdowns just because I couldn't get the right clothes or the lipstick color was incorrect. And I spent most of my teen years either trying to be accepted into a social clique or trying to find my own identity. Basically, I was a walking contradiction. And yet, how many of us wish we could run away from our teenage years, change our identities, or even start over? I know I did. Isn't this beginning to sound a bit like a midlife crisis? This term was coined in the 1960s by Eliot Jacques. And what he noticed was there was this psychological distress in 30 to 60-year-old adults. And he believed that this was an inner conflict over your identity, mortality, and life choices. And some of these signs of a midlife crisis is gaining weight, losing weight, changing partners, increased anxiety, and depression. And the list just goes on and on. But what I propose is that a midlife crisis isn't really a crisis, but rather a wake-up call. Because when I think of a crisis, I think of the war in Israel, or a sudden loss of a loved one. So instead of a crisis, what if we looked at this differently? At different stages in our lives, we have different priorities. And when those priorities need to change, we will more than likely experience a period of transition. The difference between crisis and transition is that you can't choose your crisis, but you can choose your transition. And it all comes down to the way that you look at it. This could be an opportunity for those things that you were too poor and too scared to do in your younger years. This is also an opportunity to get you out of those ruts and routines. And haven't some of you had the feeling that you wanted to retreat from your current life to become someone else, to have a do-over? Yes. So you might think of this as a second adolescence. Or, as I like to say, this is my chance to rediscover who I am. So let's go back about 2 years, and I was living a cliche. I was doing what I loved. I had a house, a mortgage, 2 adult children who no longer lives at home, and a great group of friends. You might say I was living the American dream. And yet, I was bored. The thought of going into work every day and then coming home and doing the same thing every day became stifling and suffocating. So I started to look for new ways that I could challenge myself. I looked for new skills in my job, I grew my business, and for those of you that know the Squid Game, I actually applied for it and made it all the way to the end till I backed out. Another talk. So in regards to that, I also set up a goal for myself where I could travel every month. And I'm in the last month of fulfilling that goal. So I ask you, does going to Tahiti, Portugal, or Machu Picchu sound like a crisis to you? Does it to me? It sounds like an amazing opportunity that allowed me to challenge myself. I was energized, youthful, happy. I was discovering who I am, but most importantly, who I could become. So could it be that I was going through a midlife crisis? No way. Because after all, I had this image of what a midlife crisis was, and that was of an old man. Surely I couldn't be it, because women don't go through that, right? We age gracefully right up to menopause, and then apparently it goes downhill from there, and then we lose our seat in a red convertible to a vacuous, unsophisticated Barbie doll. But anyway, I digress. My point is, women also go through a midlife transition. And the research is showing that there is very little difference between men and women. And this is often described as a midlife low. And we see this in the U-shape. They call it the U-shaped curve. And the first half of your life, your happiness will go down. You hit the midlife. But the good thing is, as you hit into your 50s and 60s, guess what? Your happiness increases. And they also found this in chimps and orangutans, which is amazing. So it begs the question, if it also happens in primates, could midlife be natural, biological, or rather than social and societal? And it also begs the question that just how much have we really evolved beyond chimps? So either way, the good news is that we will pass through our midlife transition and eventually be happier than we were in our 20s. So if sometime you see me pull up in a red Corvette with a shiny new Ken doll by my side, oh, please don't judge. I'm having a transition. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters and guests.